Welcome everyone to our second webinar for our New Jersey chapter. My name is Israel Rodriguez. I am your chapter president, and I'd like to welcome all the attendees. And in addition to that, I also like to attend our non-IFMA members who and would ask that you would consider joining the organization. I can tell you that the IFMA National has been producing a lot of resource information that you can utilize, that you can take advantage of. And in addition to that, there's also forum discussions with a lot of FM sharing a lot of critical information that I think you will find very useful. So please take that into account, and definitely something you should take advantage. And with that, I'd like to first acknowledge our 2020 annual sponsor. Our gold sponsor is Envision Environmental, followed by our silver sponsor, Building Security Services and System, and last but not least, our bronze sponsor, Dolphin. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to Kevin, our moderator for today's panel discussion.
Hey, appreciate it, Israel. Thank you so much. And thank you all that have joined this. Well, let me start with who I am. I am Kevin Phoenix. I'm the second VP of New Jersey IFMA. I've been in facilities management for, facilities management over 20 years. And I've been in engineering and facilities operations and plant engineering for too many years, 38 years to count. I now teach facilities management at a couple of schools, so I know your pain. I retired 2 years ago, and one of my colleagues that's on this phone says, Kevin, thank God you got out of the game when you did. I know that we are facing the toughest challenge of not only our careers, but you got to go back really, if you work in the United States, you got to go back to probably prior to World War II, because in the US, facilities were open in the US. You got to go back to the great pandemic 100 years ago to see the impact that's been had on our society. We're all relearning how we do business. The basic tenets that we had before no longer apply. And we, as facilities managers, are the ones that have to lead this charge. So today I have the pleasure of being joined by a spectacular panel. I am so impressed by the people that joined. My job is just not to mess up so they all get to talk. You've got 5 really, really smart people. Some of them I've worked with for over 20 years on this panel. Some I just met, but I can tell you they're all brilliant. And I'm hopeful they can bring you the information you need to be successful. That is our goal. But first, I want to start off with recognizing some sponsors for today's meeting. So I'm going to share the screen and hang in there. I'm going to talk to you after about how the meeting is going to go and how you can ask questions, because I think the most valuable part of this whole thing is you being able to ask questions. So let's start off with who is sponsoring us for today. Sponsor number 1. I want to thank ASP, Advanced Specialty Products, Pitman, New Jersey. ASP is a full-service facility supply house. They can provide almost any chemical, material, or tool utilized in a commercial facility. They're located in Pitman, New Jersey. I talked earlier to Tom Ducalo. He's on this line. He's the contact at ASP. And Tom, I want to thank you and ASP for sponsoring this meeting. Next, I'd like to introduce Mark Roman. Mark is going to talk to you for a minute or so about Envision Environmental. Mark, can you go ahead?
Sure, Kevin. You can go to the next slide. Envision's a full-service environmental health and safety consulting firm, and our main office is in New Jersey, and we provide our services across the country. Next slide, please. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we're all reevaluating our priorities, shifting responsibilities on a daily basis. And as we navigate our way through these uncharted waters, we're making our way through very challenging times, as Kevin alluded to. And we often find that our focus changes each and every day, and it seems like maybe even on an hourly basis. Go ahead, Kevin, next slide. And when events affect our focus, very important issues can easily be overlooked. And what we're finding at a lot of facilities are many key environmental health and safety issues are being overlooked. Next slide. And when these key issues are overlooked, significant problems will eventually occur. And unfortunately, when problems occur at a facility, that finger is always pointed at the facility manager. Next slide, please. But I want to assure everyone, we're here to help you guys out. We're keeping an eye on local, state, and federal regulators across the country to see how they're handling EH&S compliance issues during the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide. And it's pretty confusing to figure out what you're supposed to be doing because every day it seems to change. And we're happy to help out at no charge for all of the meeting attendees. Next slide. So as a result, if you have any specific questions about compliance permits or anything else related to EH&S issues, don't wait on it. Contact us. Our contact information is on the screen. You can call us or email me, and we'll be happy to help you out at no charge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. And Mark has been sponsoring us for years. And this is a great organization. Please, please don't hesitate to reach out with them because as Mark mentions, that's going to be a key area we're going to talk about in the future is the environment that we have to maintain in our facilities. So next, I'd like to introduce Meg Fenimore. Meg Fenimore, BE, Business Environments. Meg, are you there?
Hi, yes, thank you so much for allowing Business Environments to be a sponsor of this great event. The topic of returning to work post-COVID is definitely something that is on all of our minds. My name is Meg Fenimore, and as I mentioned, I represent Business Environments. We're an MWBE certified full-service commercial furniture dealership, and we're located in Parsippany, New Jersey. Our objective is to create healthy and safe work environments where people can be productive and emotionally secure. We position ourselves as strategic partners by learning what your company goals and brand are, listening to your concerns and problems, and creating customized, cost-effective solutions accordingly. Currently, companies are turning to us to help with work reentry solutions in the form of providing disinfectant services, screens, room dividers, air purifiers, hand sanitizing stations, or even signage to help navigate office traffic. I look forward to the panel discussion this afternoon, and if anyone would like to discuss their own current floor plan, please feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you so much, Meg. And as there we have another supplier. The one thing we want to talk about of FMs, we've got a hard job to do, but we cannot be successful with having great suppliers. And one thing that New Jersey IFMA can provide for you, if you're not a member, is access to great suppliers that we have relationships with, and we can tell you that they can do the job. And you just heard from two of them, and I told you about another one. So let's go to what the feature is for today. Our FM world post-COVID-19 crisis. What do New Jersey FMs need to consider to return to work? And one of the things that I'm happy about is that this is New Jersey folks here on the phone telling you a lot of what they're going to actually do at their facility. So they are living this, and so they're going to be able to give you some great advice. And what I'm going to do is read the bio on the 5 panelists as we go on. I thought right now, actually, I'm just saying before we start. So first up will be Maria Cristallo. Maria Cristallo, FMP, is a facilities management professional with over 40 years of experience working with multiple global companies, including Risk Management Solutions and JP Morgan Chase. Her career areas of expertise include client development, marketing, and facilities management. Currently, she's a member of the RMS COVID-19 Task Force and Reentry Planning Team for multiple facilities globally. And hold on one second, I want to be able to see these folks. So I just put the screen on, and Maria is going to be probably the third from the left on the top on my screen. You want to give him a wave, Maria? There's Maria, very good. Lorenzo Fellini. Lorenzo, as he's also, we have on the line 2 people from Becton Dickinson, Lorenzo and Tom Kaminsky. Lorenzo is the Senior Director of Global Facilities Operations for Becton Dickinson, BD, based in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey. He's responsible for facilities operations for corporate facilities located in over 54 countries. He's a mechanical engineer with training in civil and environmental engineering. He's got 25 years experience in engineering disciplines. He's specialized in facilities design and improvements. He is an IFMA CFM, so he is a certified facilities manager, licensed and a licensed PE in New Jersey, Florida, and Pennsylvania. Lorenzo's colleague, Tom Kaminsky, FMP, who is available by audio, is the Facility Services Manager for Becton Dickinson, Franklin Lakes. And I've known and worked with Tom for almost 20 years. Tom's got a depth of experience in facilities management and operations. And we used to work for C.R. Bard, which was acquired by Becton Dickinson. And at C.R. Bard, I know one of the highlights in Tom's career was he led our disaster recovery for our Humacao, Puerto Rico facility after it was hit by Hurricane Maria. So Tom's got quite a bit of experience in, Tom, I would say we have too much experience over the years in disaster recovery, but he's the type of people we want to have on this call. Lorenzo, can you give him a wave? There's Lorenzo, great. Next, we have Rich Boster. Rich Boster, AIA, CID, LED, AP. Rich Boster is the Senior Vice President of Design from EI Associates. Rich brings over 35 years of expertise in planning, design, and project management to EI's assignments. As a Senior Vice President of Design, he has full responsibility for development of architectural and engineering projects from planning through construction and administration, as well as coordination of EI's in-house engineering disciplines for all projects. He's now the principal in charge of specific major assignments. I know he knows his stuff because I've been working with him since 1993, as I recall, Rich. He's good at what he does. Rich, can you give him a wave, please?
Been some time, Kevin.
Yes, it has. Next, I'd like to introduce Caroline Shelley. Caroline Shelley is a lead AP, founder and principal of HF Planners, Branchburg, New Jersey. Caroline Shelley has been in the office design field for over 20 years. She started in the facilities department for an insurance company and saw the need to provide services that complement the facilities manager's daily concerns as it relates to design. In 1999, she started HF Planners, where she continues to support facilities managers with the design of space from conference rooms all the way up to 400-person office restacking projects. Caroline, another person I've worked for quite a bit. She's done some great work for me at C.R. Bard. Caroline, could you give him a wave, please?
Everybody.
And you've got Caroline. And last, but certainly not least, because we don't get anywhere, nothing works unless the air conditioning works, right, John?
That's right.
We've got John Bellata, PE, principal from Siska Hennessy Group, Hamilton, New Jersey. John has over 30 years of experience in the design and construction and administration of mechanical systems for healthcare projects, including hospitals, medical centers, and laboratories. His experience includes Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, the UMDNJ, that's I believe in Elizabeth, their health services, hospital campus. As the New Jersey office as the New Jersey office director, his responsibilities have included supervision of project team members from all engineering disciplines, management of design and construction process and budget, and overseeing all design services. John is a licensed professional engineer. He's lead accredited professional and a member of ASHRAE and ASHE. So John, can you give him a wave, please? And John never quits because you can see he's actually doing this conference from his workshop there in the basement. So folks, we've got a very talented group here. So I'm looking forward to what this group's going to provide you, and then looking forward to you being able to ask them questions. So let's go on to the next, let me share. I'm going to share the screen now. We'll go to presentation mode. And I'll tell you how we'll run this webinar. So what we're going to do is we're going to allow each SME to speak. Each one has a set amount of time. They know what it is to talk. But what's going to be important is this is not supposed to be a one-way conversation. So live is better, but we're going to try to do the best we can through this webinar format, because I want to encourage questions and answers. You answering your questions is why we are here today. You're encouraged to ask questions of each SME member while they're talking. Just click the Q&A button. You should have a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I can see there's one question waiting for me. Type in your question and hit send. And what I'll do while the SME is speaking, I will review that question, and I'll ask that question. I'll ask as many as I can at the end of their speaking time. Now, after the last SME is finished, we are going to try to do, and we're going to be successful, we're going to do an open mic Q&A. We just ask that everyone not speak at the same time. In fact, there's a raise hand button on your screen. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a raise hand button. What we'll do is if you hit the raise hand, I'll try and find you, and then we'll let you ask the question live. And I think that live discussion should be a great part of this meeting. So we are encouraged to ask questions. I'm looking forward to moving forward with this. So let's get it going. First up, Maria.
Yes.
Hang on, just give me a minute and I will bring up your slides.
Ah, there it is. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I think we're all finding ourselves in unfamiliar territory and trying to find the safest way to re-enter the workplace. So for me, there were 16 offices globally to prepare for re-entry, and we decided the best course of action was to approach this with minimum cost to RMS while maintaining the safety of our people. In part, this was based on time and construction constraints. And more importantly, we don't want to make major renovations that may no longer be relevant in 18 months or so. So we're thinking an evolved best practices will be our guidance so that we can adjust and change as needed. And this gives us time to determine if reconfiguration really is warranted. So additionally, employee behavior is going to drive planning. And that's currently an unknown for us. We did put out a survey for our employees and we did collect a lot of data from that. But the reality is until they step foot in the office, we really don't know what's going to change their minds about how they want to be in the workplace, how safe they feel, any psychological repercussions, and so on. So we want to almost play as we go so that we can be pretty much fluid and flexible and adjust as we have to. So this slide represents our best case scenario in our Newark, California office. The red circles represent what we call our 6-foot ring of reality. In this case, while capacity was reduced post-COVID, we had enough vacancy to still support the entire staff. Our London office, on the other hand, is a worst case scenario where we're displacing about 65 people. This office is going to require some portion of the employee base to work from home for a period of time. Next slide, please.
Sure. Okay, it should be up, Maria.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you removed the London from, you can go to the next one.
Oh, next one. Okay, there you
I
go.
thought that one was eliminated. So shift seating, we decided to go that route. It's the fastest way to get our people back to work safely. The method requires no reconfiguration. In some cases, we'll shift 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. And in other offices, it'll happen on alternate days. We'll be able to have 100% of our employees to return to work in most cases. Given the productivity of our teams, we may decide to have some work from home for an extended period of time. We feel flexibility is key based on how people feel about returning to the office. Next slide, please. This slide reflects our rolling reentry timeline, and it shows a phased plan to return staff back 25 to 30% on phase 1, again 25 to 30% on phase 2, and then the remaining in the last phase. And this can run anywhere between 2 to 4 months, depending on how we extend it and how things work in the office.
Hey, Maria, I have a question. Looking at your reentry timeline, is that based only on schedule, or are there some targets that have to be met, like nobody gets sick, or is it so it's a time based or is it performance based in some way?
It's more time based and again with a lot of flexibility. We're going to let the first 25 to 30% come in and find out what happens, what problems we run into, and any other challenges, and then decide, well, how many days do we really need to run until phase 2? And so on. So that's really the plan, is to just slowly bring them in and react as needed.
Okay. Very good. Do you have any other slides?
Yes, there's one.
There's one more. Okay, let's go. There you go. Okay.
So these are all the services that have our focus right now. And to touch on some of it, obviously safety is our primary objective and it impacts every one of these categories. But some of the things we're doing is we're working closely with the landlord to understand their response plan and protocols and ensure that ours mesh with that. We're working with our people team to ensure new policies and procedures are put in place at all locations. We're looking at options to enhance our HVAC systems. We're increasing our cleaning protocols and adding additional day porters to focus on touch points. And we're trying to leverage available technology. Like for instance, we currently have the Envoy system, but and it's a check-in service that we use when people come to the office and you're notified that you have guests. We were pleased to find that they now have an app that allows us touchless access along with tracking who's in the office and have clearance to be there. So if we say only 25% of our employees can come in and they've been identified on Envoy as authorized people, if someone tries to check in through that app and their name is not on that list, they're going to be denied access. And we're doing things like electrostatic sprayers, reprogramming our Teams conference room iPads to reduce touch on that. We're looking into sensors that warn when someone is within 6 feet of you. We use Send Words now as our mass emergency notification. Our monitor displays will be used for COVID-19 messaging for anything we want to make sure people see. There's also, of course, PPE supplies for all employees, signage demonstrating proper hand washing and 6-foot distancing, etc. Arrows on the floor where there are one-way entry and exits. We've ordered touchless temperature screening, touchless sanitizers and wipes. These are going to be placed strategically all over the office. Our objective is to make our employees feel safe and comfortable when they return to work. And these are only, some things that we're looking into. I mean, we've been doing presentations up to C-level folks all week long. So it's been a lot of midnight hours this week. And we're just trying to provide everything we need to get people in, keep them safe, and manage issues when they occur, i.e. somebody comes in with COVID and how are we going to deal with it for the protection of others and the care of the person who has it. So that's basically the plan for us right now.
Great, great. All right. Well, let me do this. Let me look. We have a couple of, I want to just check the chat. So give me a moment here. I'm reading, okay. I have a question from Pam S. So it says here, Maria, okay, good question. Maria, so can you comment, how are you coordinating with human resources throughout this? Are you doing this on your own, or are you working with human resources, or?
Okay, that's, so I'm sorry, we changed the name to People Team, which nobody knows whenever I say that. So People Team is our HR. And there are a number of policies and protocols that they are currently working on that we obviously are going to incorporate and put into our plan. So it's actually a massive plan and dashboard between HR, facilities, and those in info security.
Nice. And in fact, I'm going to take this opportunity to ask another question that came up. This question came up about how do you, Maria, you mentioned controlling people coming into the facility. And, if you look at it, if you have any issue, any problem, the root cause obviously is to keep out people that are causing the issue, that are sick. It sounds easy, but in fact, it's not that easy. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we have to do is we do need to make sure that we are working with human resources to make sure that we're dealing with the human resource policies that you have to have in place. Because there are literally laws that you have to work with in the state of New Jersey relative to human resources and the labor law. In addition, I'll find it later, but we had a legal contact. There are a lot of legal issues you've got to deal with. Like, for example, let's just say we have somebody that's coming into the facility and they are obviously sick. Or if you screen them and you get their temperature is 102. You literally can't just say you're sick, go home in front of everybody.
Right.
You got to have a protocol where you hold this person aside and take them to a side room, because now you've got HIPAA. I don't know if you want to, anybody wants to talk about that. You've got HIPAA issues you got to deal with. That you can't share people's illnesses with others.
Right.
So I don't know, comment anything on that, Maria?
Well, yes, we are aware of the HIPAA laws, and HR has the protocol that we have right now, that if anybody comes in sick, we do have to take them into a private, closed room where nobody can see you. We will ask them to leave the facility if, in fact, they present as sick. We will offer them transportation and pretty much anything they need at that point to get them home. And then we have to report up into HR, who there is a COVID team that I am part of, which tracks all of the people.
Great. And I'll ask one more, and then we'll move on. Just get ready, Lorenzo will be next. So Maria, what types of touchless temperature checking or checking system are you using? This is the question.
Okay, I don't have the name right now, but I can get it for you. We have ordered it's a touchless gun for the forehead. It was ordered by one of our other offices, so I'm actually waiting for it to arrive to see it.
Great. If you could send that information to me, and what we'll do is we will make this information, any Q&A, the answers, we'll make it available to those that are on this call afterwards. So Maria will send that to me, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Maria. Great start.
Thank
you.
So
now up is Lorenzo. So give me a second, Lorenzo. I'm going to actually get Maria's presentation down. And I'll pull yours up.
Great. Can you hear me okay, Kevin?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. So I'll say just good afternoon to all my New Jersey peers out there. I'm proud to be a member, and I extend a sincere thank you to Israel and Kevin and the whole New Jersey chapter team for organizing this call and helping us get together and share our experiences. It's always good to help each other, and if we can all be successful, it's a positive thing. So.
All right, Lorenzo, you are good to go.
Okay, so good afternoon. I am a member of the BD Core Crisis Management Team. So there's essentially a corporate core team that is made up of many pieces, right? From HR components to it's led by our risk management team. It has members from not only risk, but in HR, facilities, our IT group, global info security, and some other components, public relations, public affairs, and manufacturing operations, right? So BD has quite a footprint in that space. We're a global medical technology company, 65,000 employees globally in 54 countries. As Kevin mentioned, we have over 300 sites globally, serving three main segments of healthcare: medical, life sciences, and interventional. Right, and about 30% of our sites are around our manufacturing sites, where we do med tech fabrication, typically in ISO 7 and ISO 8 clean room qualified environments, and as well as sterilization. So, quite a diverse set of sites, but very clean, right? Just like pharmaceutical sites, it's a clean environment. And I think that's part of the reason we've had positive results. Go ahead. You can click onto the next slide, Kevin.
Sorry about that. There you go.
Yeah, no problem. So really, I just put some content up, but really I want to talk through some of the things. And my main objective is really to cover our re-entry plan. But what we want to take away is from our production sites, which never left, right? We stayed open the whole time. And right now, I think 100% of our manufacturing sites are still manufacturing, and that BD is classified as an essential business due to the COVID products that we make, including swabs and testing kits and diagnostic equipment and collection devices. So, we were actually put under the gun and asked to ramp up production in many areas. At the same time, all of our elective surgery products, right, the stents and the hernia meshes and all that stuff actually is pretty much, those have been pretty much furloughed, right, for the short term. So it's been a challenge to bump up production in certain areas and then downsize in others, and really keeping all of our sites open to allow doing that. So I want to take you through some of that, because I think some of the lessons learned in the production space is going to be adopted in opening up our offices and our laboratories. And you know, the core foundational guiding principle for the core crisis team was really to ensure the safety of our associates, right, and at the BD sites and also in the field. So we're just going through a phase 1 re-entry, and our sales folks, you know, going out to the hospitals, and our field technicians going to the hospitals, and the lab, you know, the diagnostic labs, and our customers, they're the first ones going back, right? So it's minimal in the office, but it's really geared around our field associates. So let me go through here. Our manufacturing plants, like I said, they stayed open and functional. Obviously, in accordance to local and country guidance and mandates, we had some plants that were mandated to reduce capacity 50%, right, occupancy. So we had to, right off the bat, go down to a 50% workforce. That was Malaysia as one. To date, we've had an extremely low number of cases internal to BD, roughly less than 0.5% of our total workforce has been tested positive or presumed positive. So how did this happen? It's probably a result of many factors, but we did take positive steps to protect our people and our product through a couple of key areas, right? One was readiness, right? And as part of readiness, you know, screening procedures are key. And when I say screening, a lot of that's temperature screening, right? That was one thing that we did for the large sites that have high throughput, high shift changes. I'm talking 1,000 people per shift. We implemented continuous IR monitoring, so infrared scanning that basically can be viewed remotely. You know, it takes a picture of your face and you know, sees the temperature, and then you can make a determination on you know, whether you reject somebody and tell them to go see a healthcare professional or let them in. Another part of screening was visitor registration, right? So there was a very detailed procedure written centrally around how we want to handle visitor registration and the questions you asked, the kind of a brief survey of anyone coming in, because that was one of the key things. You had to really open the sites just to essential personnel, essential to production. The other thing around readiness was PPE inventory. You know, a lot of the sites were ready. A lot of the sites had some you know, base quantity of face masks, either surgical or N95, hand sanitizer, surface disinfectant, nitrile gloves, or you know, similar. And you know, that was a big piece. It was challenging because, you know, if you didn't have PPE, try going to buy PPE. You're going to be waiting for weeks, sometimes, you know, longer. Sometimes it just wasn't available. So we actually had some innovation come from some of our sites. We actually are manufacturing our own face shields. At our Ireland plant, we're doing 4,000 a day for the face shield. So in North Carolina, we're manufacturing a sanitizer, right? It's a liquid sanitizer, but at least we can get it out in bulk and then distribute it and get it into bottles, right? So we did a lot of that. Working from home, you know, as part of readiness, you know, working from home, we forced anyone who didn't have to be in the site, critical to production. You have a laptop, you could take your monitors home, you know, so you have dual monitors. That was an issue, you know, with a lot of people. They wanted to have dual monitors, so we said, listen, pick them up, take them home, pick up any peripherals you want, and you can use it. And you know, by and large, we've been really productive working at home. I was joking with Kevin, we actually with Israel, we did a survey from our Poland Shared Service Center. We surveyed 300 out of 600 people there just about a week ago. and 18 people wanted to come back to the office. I think that's a little bit of a fear factor at this point, but it just shows you they're being very productive at home. You know, we haven't seen a drop. We did a fiscal year or fiscal quarter close remotely, and it's working pretty well. So it's, if anything, that's in my mind changing the paradigm, you know, to the new normal, as you, if you want to refer to it as that. But that this will, you know, this technology revolution is actually occurring. And then for people, you know, as part of readiness working on site, we had to make sure that that essential employee notice, you know, each one of them had a notice that was written out. It was for getting them to work, right? So they wouldn't be stopped and told they couldn't come to work. BD was an essential producer of product, and that had to be you know, made public, right? So we put it in a letter. We had the right local and country certifications, and we gave that to our people. And then another last piece of readiness was tabletop exercises to simulate a pandemic emergency, right? So during the pandemic, for example, you have a contamination of one area of your production. You can't take your whole production site down. So how do you isolate it? How do you decontaminate? We wrote, again, centrally, we wrote enhanced cleaning protocols, which are not only for ongoing cleaning, but they're also, they also stipulate what you do in an emergency when you have a decontamination situation, right? And then also workforce reduction, a scenario for if you lose 50% of your workforce because of a hotspot, right? There's a situation that happens and affects 50%. How are you going to operate? You have to have a plan to be able to continue production, continue operation on a reduced staff. Other things that were done was prevention and control management. So staff and visitor management. We have a very comprehensive system. It's a website you go to if you don't feel good. If you're not going to be coming to work, you track, you report yourself. It's self-reporting. It's all HIPAA compliant, and it was approved actually in Europe too. So if it goes through the European test, then it's probably pretty good. But it's attendance and absentee reporting. You know, we communicate constantly around what associates have to know as far as their symptoms, right? I mean, knowing that and like those simple things are really important. If you do report in as COVID positive or presumed positive, then contact tracing comes into effect, and it's a manual process. We don't have any fancy, you know, app or software to you know, to avoid any privacy issues, but we do make telephone calls, and we'll go back and basically keep, you know, notifying people if they've been in contact, and then figure out what spaces, you know, need to be decontaminated too if that person is positive. So that has been keeping us busy, tell you. So the other thing is physical distancing, right? 2 meters, about 6 feet distance. We implemented sanitization kits and supplies in all common areas, enhanced cleaning, and an escalation process. So the core central management team, if anyone reported themselves positive or presumed positive, the core management team was informed, the whole team, probably 15 or 20 members of the situation. So they're always in the loop on things, right? And this is a global reporting system. So I think part of the key to the success there was just having a level platform to communicate on. Manufacturing's operation continuity plan was another area that we focused on too. It was really around assurance of supply, because, you know, our suppliers are going through the same thing. Do they have a pandemic plan, right? What does that look like? Are they ready for a 50% workforce reduction if necessary? Do they have the letters telling local authorities that they're an essential supplier to BD, right? So we partner with our procurement group, and the local authorities in many cases, and we made sure that happened. There was some cases where we were coming short on critical products, right, that we need to make our product. So, you know, that raised some flags for short periods of time, and we eventually, you know, got over those hurdles. But that was a big one. You know, that was a big, you know, point for us, where we were actually coming short on critical supply and almost took some plants down. And Communication plan, right? A communication channel for the plant itself to communicate with the plant workers. So every plant was required to have a pandemic plan, and then a local communication channel. And then we have a company intranet training on COVID and self-monitoring that came more from, the corporate site. And then the last piece of that production puzzle was logistics management. It was around, because I'll tell you, that was very complex too. And it still is, because freight is moving, but it's moving much slower, and it's hard to get out of certain countries. We have a lot of production in China. We have, and tricky to get out and into the countries with this in this pandemic, and freight management was really critical. So that was another piece of our core crisis team, was our logistics supply chain group. So, looking at this, I mean, the impact short term, we're still getting out of crisis mode, I think, but we're in a phased re-entry coming out of the crisis, and slowly we're in phase one, basically, which was May 15th for sales, very limited scope of people. Back in the offices, really, we're still seeing much less than 25% of our people that are coming back. Right now, actually, they're being encouraged to not come back. They're being encouraged, if you're working effectively from home, then keep working from home. I think phase two, we don't have a date yet for phase two, but it's going to be based on data. And that's one thing I can tell you all is, don't feel left out, because I mean, one of the key things to do is, you're not in this alone. Build a coalition in your company. No matter what size, you should have several people there. Several heads are better than one, that can feed into the strategy and really base the strategy on data and information. Surveillance is really important. We have someone responsible for surveillance and alignment of our plan with the respective local and country authorities. What are their plans, right? And we're going to be more conservative no matter what. So, and then what are the triggers, right? So establish the triggers. If they're influenza-like, illnesses, you're monitoring the local hospitals, whatever it is, have your triggers set up. And then, I think our next phase is probably going to be no more than 50%, where, some countries are, getting all their people back. China's at 100%. They're saying, go back to work, go normal, so and we do have offices in China. So we're being pushed into it in some countries, and other countries, it's more conservative and they don't want anyone back. So it's kind of a mixed bag, and it's complex. The bottom line here is, those who have been really working remotely effectively will remain doing that for the indefinite future here. So long term, and the pressure I'm getting from the C-suite, so to speak, is how are we going to streamline our real estate portfolio now, right? This is the pressure that all facility managers and real estate people are probably facing now, is you have leases coming up. I'm not approving it. Tell me how we're going to, streamline, or if we can. You got to do a post-COVID analysis on everything. That's a long-term play, because leases don't expire every day. But it's like, what does your footprint look like in the long term? And then another thing we're doing is a touch point analysis. And Tom is on the line, and he can jump in anytime. But he's leading a touch point analysis for the company, and looking at eliminating touch points through use of technology, through engineering controls. And that's going to be a long-term play too, because right now we don't have capital to spend on all this technology. It's basically short-term. We're changing our ways of working a little bit. And we're putting in all the PPE, all of the, the safeguards to mitigate the risk, but we're not going to, renovate all our facilities right now. There's no way that can happen. And we just don't have the cash, and it's being used for other things like production, right? Building lines that actually help us ramp up on certain products. And then workplace design, obviously that's a big one. I'm sure Carolyn's going to speak to you about that, but that's more of a long-term play for us too, right? That's the impact. So, some of the things we're hearing from others are very similar, to what you're hearing from me. We've been out and did, a survey with our peer groups, HR 50 and some others, and You know, 71% of the membership for that is considering testing employees. When I say testing, it's temperature testing upon their return. So 71% of, you know, medium to large companies. And I think it should apply to small companies too, right? To build that trust. It's all about building that trust for safety. On redesigning their offices, 87% are considering making physical changes to their offices, right? For us, we basically said, we're not going to make any physical changes short term. We're going to give the guidance to all the business leaders, right? So if they have a team of 20 people in an office, and you know, they're going to have to look at the space, we've given them guidance, you know, with a 6-foot radius, and said, listen, if you have to assess your space, here's some guidance. If you can't meet the guidance, then you have to phase your people. Maybe half of them work on A shift, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the other half works on Tuesday, Thursday, if they have to be in the office, right? We prefer they're not in the office, but if they have to be, then that's how they work. So, you know, if you're in a lab, you're wearing PPE, right? If you can't maintain the physical distancing. So it's, you know, those kind of things, and very consistent across our peers. Next slide, Kevin. Sorry, I'm taking more than 10 minutes, Kevin. I apologize.
There you go.
So, I'm going to be done in 2 minutes, 1 minute actually. So the theme here is really, as facility leaders, it's our job to help rebuild the trust of our people, right? That's really, you know, what I'm taking to be my challenge, to encourage them, to convince them to come back, that it's safe to come back into the office, to create a safe environment through cleanliness, organization, and establishing a flexible process that you can adjust, right? And if you have to go back out of the office, then you're ready to do that too. So the other thing I'd say is just be visible. You know, whatever you do, it's really important to be visible. And I keep preaching that to all of our facilities leaders. You want to be visible and build trust, and you know, that's it. So thanks, Kevin.
All right, well, thank you so much, Lorenzo. So we have a couple of questions, but what I'm going to do for time perspective is I'm going to roll on to, we'll roll on now to the people who help design our facilities, see what they're thinking about in the future from their perspective. And then we will roll back, because there were some questions I think that are related back to FMs, how to operate the facility, but I like to do that at the end, so we make sure that we get our last 3 speakers on board. So Rich Basta, please, sir, could you let us know from an architectural perspective and a building operator, you have your own building out there in Cedar Knolls, let's give us your professional thoughts.
Well, thank you, Kevin. And thank you, Maria and Lorenzo, for your presentation. It's so nice to hear from people who have such large facilities to operate and manage, and what a job you guys are doing. I can speak from our perspective. We have 1 major office and 1 branch office that we're working on. We have about 100 people, and it's enlightening to hear how you guys are dealing with the situation. We are currently virtually 100% remote. We're in the architectural and engineering business, very, very collaborative business. And I have to tell you that having a strong team as we have, we're so fortunate. And the collaboration is working. We do an awful lot on WebEx. One of the questions I've heard leading up to this is whether we're as effective and efficient. And honestly, I think that we are. It's a matter of having the facilities in place, having the technology in place, and having the team just willing to be flexible. I'm sure that everybody's experiencing a similar result. From an architectural perspective, I just wanted to get a little more granular in terms of what we're doing. Again, we're a small company, but you know, looking at the situation from our architectural perspective, the information is constantly developing, the targets are constantly moving, but there are some things that everybody can examine in your facilities on how to deal with this moving target, if you will, and what to do. And for us, it's like a programming exercise. My suggestion is that you walk through your facility from the time you get out of your car to the time that you put the key in or punch the button, whatever you do to get your car going before you leave. So when you enter the site, for example, is there a control point that from your car you're entering the site? Is that a touch control point? Touchless activities are very important in that arena. But also when you get to the front door, how do you enter the building? I've seen situations where people are leaving the front doors open. That's something to consider. That has a big impact on the building, has a big impact on your air systems, on your heating and cooling systems as we go through the seasons. Do you have the facilities at the door to do the monitoring that everybody's talking about, to do the heat sensing that everybody's talking about? Where are the supplies kept? Where are the PPEs kept? Things of that nature. As you go through your facilities, things need to get a little granular in terms of how you prepare for people coming back and how you operate when they are there. Go through your day. Everybody used the men's and women's room, and to my point, that is probably the biggest exposure point in your building. Certainly you have the opportunity to wash your hands there. Hopefully you have touchless facilities to handle that. But then how do you exit that facility? That's something to examine. That's a key touch point right there. Everybody comes to their facilities, they're going to have coats, either they have lockers or they have a group closet. That's also something to think about. Do you want to put facilities in each of your workstations for everybody to keep their coats so they don't have to share those environments and share those touch points? Coffee stations, Xerox machines. We've heard about PPEs in all of those locations, and sanitization on a daily basis in those locations are probably helpful. And then lastly, when you leave the building, do you really have to touch the front door to exit the building? And how can you manage that? How can you make that work for you? So my suggestion is to go through every step of your operation and see how you can make improvements that will make the environment safer and make everybody feel more at home and more comfortable and hence more productive. Two other key areas that I've seen illustrated here are conference rooms and lunchrooms, key areas. I know in our facility, we have rather small conference rooms, and one thing that we're thinking about is how do we deal with conferences? Where do we hold the conferences? And how many people can attend a conference in those rooms? Those things are important to keep in mind. And then finally, the general environment. Air systems are critical. There are things that can be done with the air systems to help them operate better. More fresh air is one of the recommendations from the experts. If you have windows, that may be something in the transitional seasons to consider. I know some facilities have turned down their fresh air systems in order to save energy. That's something that may merit revisiting at this point in time. And then I've seen some technologies on the market. There's ionization, bipolar ionization, which we often put in new mechanical systems. We found that we can reduce the fresh air input by as much as 75% on the standard environment, which has a significant impact not only on first cost, but also on operating costs. And those technologies have some effect on viruses. That's documented and something that may be worth looking at. It's something to easily retrofit in the building. UV sterilization is another opportunity. Those are much more expensive. They're a lot potentially dangerous, and they need to be used on off hours. It's a little more labor intensive perhaps, but it's something else to consider. And lastly, I think it's important to keep all of our staff informed of what we're doing. As Lorenzo mentioned, stay out there in the open, solicit comments and be responsive is one of the most important things to do. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it, Rich. Thank you so much. I have some questions for Rich, but I'm going to actually hold them for after Caroline goes, because I do believe Caroline may have some input to a couple of the design questions I have. So Caroline Shelley, your turn, please, and I will bring up your presentation.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. So everyone, COVID-19 has been in our world for a little bit time now, but soon we're going to be entering into the COVID-19 world. And how do we do this properly and go through everything? I think Maria and Lorenzo brought up some great points. And so I'm going to walk you through a typical office. We've created a prototype office here based on some of the CDC guidelines that are currently in place, but they're being updated regularly. And how do you walk through the space? So you see at the top, I have the elevators in the white boxes there. So elevators, we believe the floors are going to be marked so that you are located within a certain area, and there are only going to be a certain number of people in these elevators now. So it's not, God forbid, you're going to New York City and you're fitting 20 people in an elevator. It may be limited to as 4 or 5 people in the elevator as once. So, okay, you get off the elevators, you're entering the reception space. What has to happen? What are the changes in your reception area? Does the desk receive a screen, as you see in the grocery stores these days, to protect your receptionist from visitors? As you proceed to the right, you would enter into the pantry area. And again, how are you going to eliminate touch points in the pantry area to mitigate the exchange of germs? Out of the pantry area, we have the bathrooms and what we're calling a personal hygiene area. And again, what has to happen in there? As you exit that area, we're allocating a wellness room next to the stairs. Some companies, if you have more than one stairwell, have an upstairs versus a down a stairwell, so that people are all going in the same direction and somebody is not coughing up at you or you're not coughing down at somebody. As you go into your regular work area, so what is this going to mean? Some companies have maintained the 54, 64-inch high panels, and that's fortunate, but other companies over the last couple of years have been going to the open desking, and you have somebody literally 5 feet across the desk from you. So what is that going to mean? And, like Maria said, do we make these changes immediately, or what can we do temporarily and then create a long-term vision here? Team areas are going to change. Instead of 10 people in a conference room, take away every other chair or mark it unavailable to be sat in, so that instead of 10 people, you only have 5 people in the room. And then coming around again to the collaboration areas where everyone was trying to get people out in the open area with their laptops and open up more communication. What's that going to mean for there? So Kevin, if you could go to the next slide. We'll drill down into each of these areas. One being an overall strategy. What is going to happen with your overall strategy? Are you staggering work hours? Do you alternate the days? How do you make sure people are comfortable entering the space? Then are you posting signage? I went to a location today that had markings on the floor where to stand. They had the health screening in one corner, and the security guard came over and took my temperature while somebody else stood 6 feet away from me. Will you require people to wear the face masks? Will you have them available if they don't bring them in with them? And how are you going to communicate all of this? So I think communication is going to be huge for your overall strategy, and then naturally staying up to date with the CDC guidelines. So in your reception area, again, promote your signage, what you expect people to do. Have the virtuals check-in like Maria had mentioned, and even the fact that she discovered an app on somebody's phone that eliminates a touch point there. The glass partition on your security desk to protect your receptionist, very important. There are units out there that are prefabricated that can either just stand right on top of a transaction counter or get screwed on to the top of the desk. But again, what's going to happen in a year or 2 years when you take this glass off, you're going to have holes in your desk. So you got to think a little bit down the road there. Non-porous materials on desks. Wood is a very porous material, even though it may be polyurethane. So you want to identify materials that are non-porous, such as quartz, copper, and high definition laminates. Again, the 6-foot demarcation on the floor, whether it's with tape or changing your carpeting design or LVT design to actually indicate it throughout the space. The fabrics on your upholstery, on your seating there, can they be cleaned? There's a newer ones for healthcare out there with a silicone coating to the fabrics that are wipeable with bleach. And then Richard touched based on the ionized air filtration system. He touched on that, and have your air clean, you know, for people to breathe. Then going into the pantry, what's going to happen there? Again, another antimicrobial counter would be important here. Copper is a alloy surface that kills E. coli in just 1 to 2 hours, as opposed to stainless steel, which holds the surfaces for weeks, the germs for weeks. Make all your eating at the tables monodirectional, so people aren't facing each other, they're all in one direction. And then have the seating be polyplastic stools or some sort of polyplastic material that can be easily wiped down. Clear view refrigerator doors, so you don't have to actually open the door to see, you know, is there creamer in there for your morning coffee? And then everything hands-free, your faucets, your soap dispensers, your paper towel dispensers, and make sure that they're not battery operated. Otherwise you'll be buying batteries weekly to replace and make sure that they're still functioning. Use single-use kitchenware. In our pantry, we have a dishwasher, but the concern is you're putting a cup in the dishwasher, you're opening the dishwasher, you're closing the dishwasher, it's getting cleaned, you're taking the cup back out. So there's multiple touch points here. So if you go to disposable kitchenware for a short time, hopefully that's going to mitigate a touch point. And then having open access garbage cans, instead of having to open a cabinet door to throw your garbage away, have the open front garbage cans to throw your garbage into, so that you're eliminating that touch point. Kevin, if you could change the slide, please. Personal hygiene area where the bathrooms are. If possible, create a hand wash station outside of the bathroom so that people don't have to actually enter the bathrooms. If you're just walking into the space, here would be an area just to wash your hands. As Richard mentioned, try the door, the bathroom is going to be the big touch point. So if you can have a door-free restroom entry, I'm sure everyone's been to Newark Airport where you don't touch a door to get into the space. It's a switchback entry to walk into the space. There'll be it would take up more space, but that would be ideal. Again, Rich had mentioned the UVC lighting above the sinks. So UV lighting is an ultraviolet wavelength that deactivates the germ cellular structure and DNA and RNA so that it can't reproduce. Again, there are units that are above the sink that are incorporated into the mirror. When the people leave the room, it senses that no one is in the space and turns on. So it's a motion sensor type situation, but you have to be careful with the UV lighting. And post signage, remember to remind people to wash their hands. And if there are lockers in the area, use the keyless entry with an app on the phone that could open and lock them up. Going over towards the work area, if you're able to space workstations 6 feet apart, that would be ideal, or have them in monodirectional, so everyone's facing the same way, no one's looking at each other, or they're looking into a corner, and so that if you have to cough, you're not coughing at somebody, or put the personal protective screens on the desks. There are movable screens on the market that are on wheels that people could roll into a conference room or into another area just for their own comfort level. Put directional arrows on the floor if you're able to keep people, you know, keep to the right on one direction and the left on another, just to help with the flow of people. And then make sure you have the sanitization stations throughout the space, and ideally like the hand sanitizer units screwed to the wall, or phone wipes. There are even personal infection centers that you can fill with masks and gloves and the sanitizer, so that it's screwed to the wall and doesn't walk back to somebody's desk with them. In collaboration areas, again, try and keep people 6 feet apart with the monodirectional desking, and make sure the upholstery can be wiped down with the silicone finish on it. And in team areas, glass protected dividers so that you can have visual connection but without the contact there. Adding plants to your space. is a natural air filter and has cooling effects on your environment. Doors into offices, I'm sure you've seen the barn doors. Those are easily opened and closed with your push of an elbow as opposed to a doorknob. Signage at doors of entry into your conference room. So if it had been a 10-person conference room, put up a sign that says only 4 people are allowed in here now, just so people stop and think before they enter the space. The ultrasonic disinfection atomizer that Rich had mentioned is essentially a spray of special food grade disinfectant that kills the bacteria and can spray within a space that has been nobody sitting in it. Any UV lighting chances, and then now with all the hard surfaces in your space, take into consideration your acoustical elements, and do you need to add baffles to the ceiling or any acoustical lighting fixtures that are out on the market today. And the next slide, Kevin. So a year ago, we were designing spaces to fit as many people as possible into offices and essentially the benching. So our model here was based on 4,700 square feet. If you had somebody at 25 square feet per person, essentially a 5x5 area, you could fit that with circulation, that would be 102 square feet per person. Now we're recommending to essentially double the size of the square feet. So that would be 50 square feet per person, and that would end up with 205 square feet per person for the circulation, taking into consideration bathrooms and other areas in the building. So I've heard other real estate professionals speculate that it could be as high as 300 square feet per person in the future, almost going back to the 1990s floor plans. So I think some of these things you can do immediately, while other changes may need to be planned, like Maria had stated, and what is the future of the office space, you know, after we all get back to work. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you so much, Caroline. And what I'm going to do, we've got some great questions. So rather than take them now, I'd like to have John go, because I'm a mechanical engineer and I want to hear about the mechanical engineering and HVAC systems. And let's hear John go. And then I think a lot of the questions that we can have everybody kind of answer together. So John, why don't you go ahead and talk about from perspective of the building infrastructure or the support infrastructure. Go ahead, John.
So yeah, it's interesting, as Richard had mentioned and Caroline touched on a little bit. You know, everyone seems to have questions about, well, what can I do with my mechanical systems, with my HVAC? And yeah, it's interesting. You know, Richard had also mentioned, you know, that we continue to try to hit a moving target, and you know, information is coming at us, you know, very quickly. And at Cisco, we have a COVID response team that's just trying to stay on top of, you know, everything that we're getting as it applies to, you know, to the mechanical and plumbing systems. So I think as of about 2 weeks ago, ASHRAE came out with they have a resource web page specific to COVID-19. And ASHRAE, American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning, is really, you know, the guiding organization, you know, on how we design our systems. And I know that most of the, you know, the FMs on the call, you know, are familiar with ASHRAE. And they had started, you know, when the pandemics first started, you know, really ramping up, is, you know, to go to 100% outside air, you know, and obviously that was, I think, more reactionary, you know, instead of proactive. But they have a list of, you know, suggestions. It's in the ASHRAE occupancy guides that you can find on the resource page. And because of how they believe COVID-19 is being transmitted, which is primarily, you know, through saliva droplets, which is why we have the, you know, this physical separation, why we have the masks. You know, they're unclear and uncertain, you know, at this point, if or how much of it, you know, is transmitted, you know, is airborne or aerosolized. And I think that that's probably going to take a few more, you know, months, possibly a year or longer, to really figure that out. Unfortunately, I think a lot of testing has to be done to determine that. So I think, within the ASHRAE guidelines, some of the things that they're recommending is, if your HVAC systems can handle it, is to install a minimum of MERV 13 filtration. Obviously, that's, you can't do that with all HVAC systems. Every building obviously is different. You may not have the static pressure to be able to do something like that. They're also talking about flushing your buildings, and running your systems 2 hours prior to occupancy and 2 hours post occupancy at 100% outside air. And then they go on to say that, when the building is occupied, is to run the systems as you normally would run them. So that's interesting. It's a divergent, message from what they had out, a few weeks ago, but, is more information and more, evidence on, the best way to handle COVID at this time, is what they're putting out. And I think that was published on May 7th of this year. Some of the other things, and I think one of the things that, some people haven't really, may not have thought about, but has to be mentioned, are your plumbing systems. So a lot of the buildings currently are not occupied. And a lot of your plumbing systems are sitting there not being, with water sitting in the systems. And I think what you have to be careful of is, the increase in bacteria, that develops in your water systems. So, for facility managers, when you're developing your protocol, it's probably something that you want to do, prior to people reoccupying buildings, is to make sure your water systems are running. Some of the other things that, were mentioned were the UVGI lights. So we use those in air handling systems, as a method, as a called a kill strategy, for viruses. A lot of that has to do with the exposure time, that the virus has to UVGI. And UVGI uses a specific bandwidth, of UV lights, UVC bandwidth, that's proven to be the most effective, at killing viruses. How that will affect COVID, I think, is unclear at this time. But, for things like SARS and influenza, that was a proven strategy. And I think Richard touched on this, and Caroline, you have to be careful where that's used. You can't just go in and retrofit, an existing air handler and stick a UV, GI system in, and expect things to be, to run as normal, because UV does break down, plastic surfaces, as well as being harmful, to humans. So I think what you have to be careful of there is, if you put something like that in, you have to make sure that wiring, is protected and things like that. Obviously, you don't want to do things to your HVAC systems, that would be detrimental. So I think doing things like, kill strategies of UVGI systems, and some of the other systems that, Richard had mentioned, like bipolar ionization, and there are others out there. I'm not an infection control specialist, so I really don't want to speak to, those other types of, systems, but I think that, what every FM needs to understand is there's no silver bullet. Every system really should be looked at to understand, what it can and can't, accept from a limitation standpoint.
Hey, John, I have a question. It's relative to humidity control. Like, for years and years and years, we never really were worried about humidity to control too much in buildings. And I've learned this. I have dust allergies.
Yeah.
So in the winter, when it gets really dry, I get this dry hacking cough.
Yes.
And so I read something maybe about 2 months ago that stated that humidification in the winter is actually important for control of not just COVID, but just virus and bacteria, because higher humidity actually keeps particles from drifting. Is there any truth to that, and what's your thought on that?
So yes. So when in the drier seasons, and it's not, for us, it's the winter time. In other areas, maybe like Denver or in Arizona, where you have, very dry conditions, what happens is, the droplets, of saliva that carry, viruses, that saliva evaporates. And then the droplets become what they call droplet nuclei, which are, can be suspended in the air, for longer periods of time. And then, the theory about what happens is, those viruses and bacteria latch on to other things that are suspended in the air and then get carried into your air system. So that's one of the things that they're still trying to figure out. And I think that we have to go through, now that they've been able to identify, COVID-19, and they understand, how it's killed, as we get into another season, another winter season, I think what you'll see is, you'll see more evidence of whether or not it's airborne or aerosolized. So the recommendation from ASHRAE right now is, if you have the ability to maintain your spaces between 40 and 60% RH, that would be advisable. But, these days, many systems, at least in the commercial building application, most HVAC systems don't have humidifiers in them anymore. I think that's something you saw, 30, 35 years ago. It's not something that you see now, because they are difficult to maintain. They could be a nuisance. I've been in plenty of facilities that have 25-year-old air handlers that have their humidifiers shut off. So it's tough. And I think it's something that, they don't definitively know, but it's definitely about risk mitigation. And I think the feeling is, though, if other viruses act that way, that there's a good chance that COVID may act the same.
Thank you. So, thank you so much, panel. I mean, my father used to have a statement. He used to say he loved when he's the dumbest person in the room, because he wanted his kids to all get educated. It's really been a pleasure to listen to all of these brilliant, forward-looking professionals with a lot of tenure and knowledge talk about what they're doing. So I want to now answer some questions that we had come in. So I'm going to ask as many as we can. We will carry this on probably till 5:45. So we still have over 70 participants. So feel free to stay on as long as you can. We'll go to 5:45. So let me just ask some questions that came in. So a question I have here, let's see, came in for Rich, but anybody can answer it. It was anonymous. A key element for women is touchless restroom stall, opener, closer solutions. So is anybody aware of any restroom, I guess, just the restroom stall that's actually when you go into the commode area? Anybody hear about touchless doors? Anybody hear anything about that?
No, I haven't seen touchless doors. I guess you could, if you wanted to, take the doors off, but I'm not sure that our culture will bear that very well.
Yeah, I think it's more like boot camp.
Yeah, summer camp.
All right. So question came in, let's see. I think it has to do with airflow. Oh no, UV sterilization. I guess the question was, could we expand on UV sterilization usage and any knowledge about sanitizing building equipment such as IT server racks? So I think we talked about it anecdotally. Were there any, I don't know, were there any recommendations? Does anybody have suppliers that they could recommend for UV sanitization? This is interior now, not HVAC.
Yeah.
Sure, there are mobile UV units that can go into each room, depending on the length and the size of the room, how many corners that it has. It can take 5 minutes all the way up to 20 minutes to clean a room,
Yeah, so I would invite attendees to send an email in with your follow-up question, what I'll do is I'll get it to the right person. Were you going to say something, John?
I was just just adding on to what Caroline was saying, we work in, some hospital facilities that have UV robots. And I don't know if anybody has seen the cleaning robots that are in the grocery stores, but it's, a similar concept. The robot basically, goes through the room, an empty room, obviously, and has UV lights and moves at a relatively slow pace, just to have that exposure time for the UV light to kill the germs and the viruses.
Yeah, the nice thing about UV is it does disinfect the surfaces, but it is relatively dangerous. That's the...
Yeah, for people.
Yes.
So I had a question. I know it came in, I'll go from memory. Now remember, one of the things I think is important is we talked about the concept of, I think both Caroline and Rich talked about the concept of going from the front door and walking through. And I call it the concept of flow charting. Actually flow charting your entire process of entering. Anytime you make one change, it's going to affect something else. And I think John alluded to that. So one thing is going to be interested in flow charting, but let's think about a simple mechanical issue. We're going to bring in all this paper, all these gloves, all of these extra things we didn't have before, and guess where they're ending up? I had one person said they're ending up in the drains. So let's talk about that, because now one of our persons, they have a facility, I believe it's Carol, and they're running into all kinds of issues now with their drainage system. So can we talk about that? What would the strategy be that we could utilize to keep our drains clean? Any thoughts on that?
Signage.
Yeah.
More waste cans.
Exactly. Open waste cans.
Yeah.
Well, somebody mentioned this, and
Yeah.
one of the passions I've had over the years is safety. And to me, this is like safety. This is how I teach safety. I, as a facilities manager, cannot make a safe facility. I can find out some of the procedures. I can train people, but at the end of the day, you got to have champions. What I call champions are people within your organization that are well trained. 100% of your employees or the people that come in have to know what you expect from them. And you got to explain what you expect and why. You got to make it simple. It has got to be like, 10 things you want from them. So you're going to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Here's the reasons why. And so you get 100% people trained on that. And then I always said you need 10% of the workforce that are champions. Those are people that they're going to actually walk and talk. And when they see an unsafe, or in this case, a unsanitary behavior, they're comfortable enough to maybe approach that person, or if not, approach somebody in management to say, hey, look, I saw this going on. We should work on this. Or I saw a glove in the toilet. Maybe you can work on these things. But at the end of the day, we've got to, every change we make, we've got to train our employees and our occupants. At the end of the day, they're the ones that have to enforce it. They got to do it. All right, another question. Somebody said earlier, I want to make sure I grab it. It was a great one. I think it might have been in the chat. Otherwise, I got to go from memory, and that's always dangerous for me. All right, let's see the chat. All right, I'll go from memory. Oh, here we go. Essentially, what the question was, here we go. There's a lot of unknowns. We're all flying in the blind to some extent. Let's see. So I guess what they're saying is that none of this is written down, and I think there's no established policies. This is another one. No established policies. Some people think go away over the summer and maybe come back in the fall. So I'll give you some thoughts on this, and I'll see what the panel thinks. If I was still a facilities manager, I'm going to assume that there's going to be a second wave just as bad as the first wave. And I'm going to prepare for that. Doesn't mean I'm going to spend the money, but it means I'm going to have a plan. And Lorenzo and the community talked about having a documented plan. So where do you get this plan is the question. So the IFMA Foundation has come up. Let me share my screen with the group. The IFMA Foundation has created a very robust pandemic planning manual. This is 101 pages. It's created by the IFMA Foundation, and I had a chance to look at this. This is a fantastic document that I would recommend, and it takes you through basically COVID-19 information, impact on your facility, how you should respond, how you should recover, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very powerful document. I would recommend, and I'm going to work with Israel and the IFMA group to get this on our website. And I recommend that you grab this and download it. It's a great way for you to, I think it's probably a good head start to getting maybe half of what you need if this is what's in this manual right here, because the key is to already have a plan. Any thoughts on that from the group as far as planning?
No, other than to say, Kevin, I think you hit it exactly on the head. You may not have to implement the plan, but having the plan is the key to it. And that mitigates half of the problem right there.
I have some questions here about health. So a lot of them about, I think the touchless points is really what I heard is critical for us to do. I want to see if I missed any questions. Well, this is more technical. Okay, I have here right here. Is the pandemic plan available on the IFMA website? Yeah, we're going to get this manual put up. UV, those are the things, the basics. I have one other item to talk about is that we did have a lawyer, Mr. Paul Mazur. Those of you, some of you may have participated. Paul Mazur did a prior webinar with us on how to prepare legally for New Jersey for COVID-19. Many of the things that are happening in New Jersey. And Paul answered some questions relative to what are our rights, what are employees' rights when it comes to COVID-19 procedures? A, can an employer administer a COVID-19 test before permitting employees to enter the workspace? Let's start with that. The answer is yes. However, there are standards that you have to meet. There are ADA standards you must meet about the testing itself. There's also standards you need to meet for HIPAA. We talked about that for privacy. Meaning you have to have a procedure where the employees screen when they come in, and let's say there's a beep. Beep, your temperature is 105. You can't say your temperature is 105, go home. You've got to now have a facility to move them to the side and have a private conversation with that employee saying, your temperature is 103, we need you to go home. And it has to be all done privately. You've got to have the right ways to document that. There's return to work issues. So these are things that you've got to make sure you've gone over with your human resource professional and your legal group within your organizations. Any more comments from the panel? All right, let me look, see if I have any more questions. Okay, question. Will this presentation be available? That's a good question. I will ask each of the presenters if they have any issue with their presentations being published, and depending on their answers, we will be able to post those on our website. Another question, how will companies absorb the financial impact of this preparedness? So we need to talk about that because we all have fiduciary responsibilities. And I think very few of us as FMs have a blank check. So how are you gentlemen and ladies paying for this? I hear some of these special procedures. How are you justifying and getting them paid for? Anybody?
Well, for me, some of the money is coming from the fact that with our office closed for over 2 months now, the monthly spend that I do just on food is upwards of $10,000 a month. So we're pumping that money into buying supplies and other costs related to the fact that people just aren't in the office right now. We have a lot of soft costs that are just not happening at this time.
So you're seeing some cost savings just from people not being in, energy, so forth, and supplies, food services that you are now, theoretically, you might be able to stay under or hit your budget, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, same here, Kevin. The same with us. We convinced our finance group that we need a central cost center to track the COVID costs, right? And we've done forecasts across all the sites to see, what those would be. But at the same time, we're trying to off balance that with like other areas that Maria mentioned, food services and energy and cleaning and, cleaning's still happening, but we don't need 40 cleaners, you know, if a facility's not being used, right, to clean the spaces. So it's trying to be offset. We're trying to offset those.
All right, any other comments from the panel? You know, at the end of the day, we're responsible to make sure that people are safe and they feel safe. At the end of the day, I think many people have said it, they're not going to return to work unless we can do that. So one of the things we need to do in our facilities budgeting, when we put together the needs for the current locations, the needs for new modifications, the redesigns of new facilities, whether there's more space required or more gadgets, we have to put in that at the end of the day, the productivity of the people is also a business proposition. You have to be able to quantify that in order to get the things that you need. So I do have a comment here from our admin, our chapter admin, Joanne, is telling me that the pandemic manual is available already on njifma.com. So apparently it is available for people to take a look at. And in fact, I have downloaded it and I think it's a fantastic document. I think I had another question come in. Okay, let's see. Are companies going to provide work from home equipment if remote working becomes a norm? Not so much an FM question, but what are your companies doing? And are you, I think, Lorenzo, you talked to this, are your companies providing the equipment for people to work from home, the furniture and the remote docking stations, et cetera?
You know, we're talking about that right now. That's an active conversation, actually, you know, and I'd love to hear what others are doing, but you know, typically we would not provide, you know, equipment for people working from home, right? Besides a laptop and you know, some peripherals, right? But this is unlike, doesn't fall in that category because now we're forcing people to work from home. So, you know, the thought is that, yeah, I think we should provide something, you know, it's just unknown, you know, and we want to basically align with our peers too in doing that. And we want to, you know, we don't want to build another process that we have to manage, you know, with thousands of associates, right? And tracking what they took home and what they don't, you know, what they should bring back. I mean, it's sometimes it's you got to look at the complexities around that. So, you know, we're weighing out different, you know, strategies and still wrestling with that problem. But we think, for the most part, I think we should provide something, you know, so that people are working ergonomically. And, you know, it'd probably be around technology and maybe some furnishings.
Okay, I'm going to take one more written question and I'm going to try to actually see if we can open it up to get a couple of live questions before we close. Okay, I'm going to pick one of the last two. One of them is tenants, but everybody on this call, I believe, runs their own facilities. So we don't have any landlords or major landlords on, so I'm going to skip that one for now. But you are welcome to email that to me and we can forward it out to some of our other FMs. But I will take this last written question. Have you explored the implementation of any metrics to help you understand, is your pandemic plan successful when employees return to work? So the question is, are there metrics that are going to be used now to measure? And I guess each one of you has an office. So how are you going to measure if your pandemic plan is working?
You know, I'll go in at first. With a small company, we've had 3 incidences out of 100, one very bad incident. We've been working at home. We've staged only certain individuals at the office to handle the paper side of our business. And we've had absolutely no further exposure or spread beyond that in 8 weeks. So, I mean, that's what we're doing now. How it works later, that's to be seen. It's so hard to track.
Anybody else? All right, well, let's do this. We've got a few minutes left. So what I'll do is I'll open this up now. If you want to ask a live question, please press raise hand. Press raise hand. So I'm going to lower all hands now. And now if you press raise hand and I see you, I'm going to pull you up and turn your mic on so you can ask a live question. So I have any live questions? Seth? I'll allow you to talk. Seth?
That's here. I'm here. How are you?
I'm fine, Seth. How are you doing?
As good as can be under the circumstances.
Well, we're all here, so that's half the battle.
Yes, it is, and then some. But
go ahead and ask your question, Seth?
yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm getting to it. The big problem, in my humble opinion, is we're giving 3 schools of thought. One is COVID is running down the road now. It'll be snuffed out in the summer. It's going to come back sometime between September and December of this year. The second school of thought is it'll be around for 12 to 18 months. Then we'll get it to either a slow simmer or it'll be out. The third school of thought, and this is all coming not from Fox News, but from people on CNN and not Dr. Gupta and whatnot. The third and final school of thought is it's never going to go away in our lifetimes. And with all due respect to the 100-page IFMA book, how do I mean, I'm working in a school in Staten Island right next to the Outer Bridge Crossing. How do we fine tune it? What works in one school may not work in Adams School in Mattawan. What works in a mall may not work in a large corporation. So how do I fine tune? Where do I go? What's right? What's wrong? Do I do one thing on Monday and the second thing on Tuesday and the third thing on Wednesday? Okay, I've said my piece.
That's a good one. All right, panelists.
Well, if I gave you the whole list, it would stretch from Sussex County
No.
to Cape
I'm
May.
sorry. Does anybody from the panel want to take a shot at that?
You know, the only thing I can say is
stumped the panel.
The only thing I could say is it's a moving target. You're absolutely right. And, you know, we talked about having a plan, but the plan has to be amenable to the situation that you're dealing with. And you know, it's once you're in this, it's like being at war. The best laid plans are great, but once you're in the war, the geography changes.
Yeah, and you know, schools have a very special challenge, Seth. You can't necessarily, how do you tell, I don't know how old your students are, but you know, I'm going to take a middle school or elementary school. How do you tell elementary, middle school system children to follow all these procedures we establish? It's tough. I think one of the things we've got to do as facilities managers, though, is remember, we have to have contingency plans, right? If there was a tornado that hit your school, you should have a plan. If we had a flood rain, there should be a plan. Pandemics, I'm going to be honest with you, our company, CR Bard, we had a plan from H1N1 in 2009. And when I pulled it out, we would have ran the same plan today. So the issue is that, I don't know if you're a public school, you're going to have to meet public standards also, but as facilities managers, you've got to look at your location, your exposures, your employees, and how much risk your organization is willing to take. And we have got to put together a plan. And I think the plan should not assume it's going to go away. The plan should assume it's going to be as bad as it was last month. And your plan to respond to that, you can always pull it down. And you should have trigger points that say, when this happens, we go to stage 1. When this happens, we go to stage 2, 3, 4. I think you heard both Maria and Lorenzo talk about this phase plan. You've got to put that together.
And the plan is only as good as the information, you know, that we all have.
That's correct. But it's a good point.
And Kevin, I'd say to Seth, maybe what you can do is, listen, you're not in it alone, right? There's a lot of schools out there in Staten Island that are probably going through the same thing. Is, you know, link up with some of your peers. You know, the county that you're in probably has an emergency preparedness office, right? What are they saying, right? It's really about getting the right minds together and going through it together, right? To make the right choice, because really, you know, the end goal is really, you want to keep the kids safe, right? And you want to keep our people and our communities safe, right? So everybody should be, you know, working together on this. And, you know, I agree. I mean, the plan, you know, you should look at different, you know, everything you mentioned there, all those scenarios you mentioned, you should probably look at having a mitigation plan for, right? So.
Agreed. And the other piece of the puzzle is, and this, I'm gonna put a plug in for both New York and New Jersey IFMA, is that I know within New Jersey IFMA, we've got at least 10 members I can think off the top of my head that are in educational facilities.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking at Rich Basta, who's done a lot of work in educational facilities. So through your New York IFMO, or we'll help you from New Jersey. Just a quick email, we can connect you with peers that can maybe even benchmark what they're doing, and that could perhaps be of help.
Thank you. Joanne has my email.
Excellent. Okay, thank you,
But
Seth.
also, I just want to say very quickly, let me give you, to answer Mr. Basta's situation or the lady's situation, we got New York City Office of Emergency Management. Each borough has their own Office of Emergency Management. Then the New York City Board of Ed has now morphed into the Department of Ed, but they're running it just like a suburban school district. So you've got 3 different entities feeding the same thing, but I wonder at the end of the day if they're all on the same page. And New York City bureaucracy is in a class by itself, my learned colleagues.
I'm, by the way, born and raised in Brooklyn, so I get it, pal.
Hey, Brooklyn, fellow, you're right. I'll buy you a beer and Anchor Tavern in Belmar when this opens up.
There you go. All right, thank you, Seth. Thank you.
Got it.
All right, any other questions? I don't see any other hands up. I'm going to give one more opportunity and we'll close this out.
Hey, Kevin, I just wanted to address one thing that I saw in the Q&A.
Go ahead.
It talked about just expanding on the static pressure issue and the MERV 13 filtration. I just to expand on that, and I think most folks probably do know, but those that don't, that's not not everybody should run out and buy MERV 13 filters and go and put it in your air handling units. The air handling unit has to have the horsepower, to overcome the static pressure, the additional resistance that filter, puts on your system. Otherwise, if you just went in and you didn't change your horsepower, or you didn't, or it wasn't capable to handle it, you would greatly reduce your airflow, into your system. So I wanted to address that question on there.
Thank you. Remember, one thing you change is going to impact something else. You got to make sure you go through the whole decision tree to make sure that what you do is not causing a further problem down the road. And we'll do one more question from the group. And Stan, you were good enough to send in some questions ahead of time. I appreciate you. Stan, can you help? Can you hear us?
Loud and clear. Can you hear me?
I do, Stan. Could you go ahead and ask your question of the panel?
Certainly. Well, first, let me say I hope everyone stays safe. I guess we are now the essential workers because it's going to be up to us to keep everyone safe when they come back to work. My question has to do with the executive suite. Traditionally, I know we've all faced the fact that we have to pull teeth to try to get these people to open up the budget to put in safety measures as far as health and safety and physical safety. So how do we deal with these executive suites who don't want to go ahead and put in the money that's required to make sure that we keep our employees safe?
Okay, so the question, I'm going to repeat it, is that we're talking about spending money here at some point. How do we convince the executive suite to spend that money, whether it's a short-term plan like putting in lines and painting and automatic door openers, or is it a long-term plan where you change the design of the facility and make it less efficient down the road than it used to be, meaning you use more square footage? How do you work with the executive suite to convince them to do it? That's the question. Questions? Anybody from the panel?
I'll defer to Maria because it sounds like she has the better strategy than me.
Well, I guess I'm fortunate. My executive suite gets it. So truly that is half the battle. No, they don't want to spend money, but when we presented them with the savings, because that was the first question, where's the money coming from? And when we looked at in the Hoboken office alone, as I said, it's at least 10,000 in food that we're spending. And then I have day porter that costs me $5,000 a month that I don't have a day porter there right now. So we kind of had a lot of excess to buy all of these additional supplies that we're going to utilize to go forward. So they were pretty happy with that. I think part of it is anytime I go in to ask for something, I kind of go pre-planned with something of a solution. I have to offer them something other than just saying, give me money.
That makes sense.
The other thing, Stan, is that as facilities managers, we spend money. We don't make money. So it makes us We're not necessarily the people that the C-suite wants to see knocking on the door asking for something. But let me restate what I just said. The number 2 most valuable thing any company has after the people, right, after the paychecks they pay, is what? It's the buildings themselves. So the buildings themselves are number 2, the people are number 1, and making them productive, therefore, is number 1. So when you walk in saying you need money for something, you don't walk in saying I need money for this. You say, I need money to do this because, and if we don't spend this, here's the negative impacts of not spending that money. And the negative impact is more absenteeism, people don't want to come to work, less productivity. If you can somehow quantify that, it helps you to justify the things that we need to make these places more productive. I hope that's helpful.
Definitely.
I think, too, Kevin, from a liability perspective, not being a lawyer, but, being an employee, I would imagine that, the C-suite would, be very attentive, to potential liability issues, of people getting sick if they didn't put the proper protocols in place.
Well, they're actually working on legislation where they will not be liable. That's one of the things that the White House is working on right now.
Yes, but will that be in place? I guess the question becomes, right, will that be in place prior to people returning to the office? As an example, we have an office in Jacksonville that is back to work as of Monday. So it would probably vary state by state until that legislation's passed.
Right. And then you've got to deal with OSHA down the road. Remember, OSHA says that you've got to create a safe workplace. You cannot have recognized hazards. And remember, just because you, in this country, you can litigate it anyway, you may not win. So nobody wants to spend time litigating when it's just easier just to do it in the first place. So you always have, I appreciate that, John. All right, well, listen, we've come to the end. I don't want to keep everybody too long, but I really want to thank every single one of you panelists. I hope the information, I want to thank you for attending. I hope the information was useful for those of you out there that are our customers. Thank you for attending. Question I had is, are we going to have a follow-up to this? We are working on it. This was supposed to be more of a strategic discussion. So we are working on a potential follow-up where we actually have people talk about actual cleaning procedures, improvements, perhaps look at employee screening. It'll be a little bit more of a tactical discussion, but we're hoping to follow this up in the near future. So anyway, I want to thank everyone for attending, thank the panelists for being on the panel, and everyone stay safe and keep our people safe. Thank you.